alaikum wa rahmatullah. Good evening, everyone. And I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you to our discussion tonight. That comes in partnership between the Saudi Association of Translation and the Institute of Translation and Interpreting in the United Kingdom. I'm actually personally very excited and thrilled to host such a international exchange. We would love to share our expertise, our knowledge, our experiences as translators from two different countries, two different cultures. And yeah, it's very exciting. My guest tonight is Dr. J.C. Bennett, who is a reader in translation industry studies. He is also an elected board director of the ITI, the Institute of Translation and Interpreting in the United Kingdom. He has researched and published on different aspects of the language industry, and his current research focuses on translators' well-being. And he published also a book in 2024 titled Working as a Professional Translator by Routledge, London. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Bennett, and welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'd say tonight, but actually I'm not sure what time it is with you. But thank you for having me today. It's really nice to come and talk to you.
Yeah. Before we start our discussion on questions, to be honest, I'd like to hear from you a little bit about your previous work. Why this subject matter, this very significant, impactful subject on translation industry per se, rather than other fields of translation studies or translating and interpreting practices, and well-being, the translator well-being, as important and significant as this is.
I'd like to say that it was all planned, but like many things in life, I just kind of stumbled into them. You know, it's just so for the translation industry. Well, I've been working closely with two colleagues in the UK, Callum Walker and Joseph Lambert. I don't know if you know of them, and I think Callum Walker approached me a few years ago and said, "Oh, we should look into, you know, what the impact of all the technological disruptors is on freelance translators." And both Joseph and Callum had worked as freelance translators. So that was something that was really close to their heart, and so we kind of embarked on a research project that was called Chasing Status. Working conditions for or job satisfaction amongst freelance translators in the UK, and that was a one-year research project, and that allowed us to gather quite a lot of data through surveys and focus groups on how UK freelance translators feel about their job, and then we kind of explored that further. And for me, more particularly, I was interested in whether there are psychological factors that impact on a freelance translator ability to respond to, or on their response to rather, to disruptors like generative AI in the industry, because even though it's widely acknowledged that it's a major challenge for a lot of people, for a lot of freelance translators, some will embrace it and think, do you know what, actually it's kind of improved my work, or it's kind of increased my business. It's a minority, but it does happen. When others are more reserved or say, I don't really want to engage with it, this is not how I define myself as a translator, it's changed completely the game, and I don't want to have anything to do with it. And I thought, well, it'd be interesting to kind of have a look into that. To answer your question as well, the well-being aspect is also linked to the fact that I think it was of quite a few years ago, I started asking my students to work in simulated translation agencies, so kind of pretend that they work as translators, so to speak, like mimic the real world, and it generated a lot of very strong emotions among students.
I can imagine.
Stress, you know, angst,
anxiety.
And I wanted to explore that further, and that was one of the research projects I carried out at the time. And through that, I became a qualified coach. So I did a postgraduate certificate in coaching, lifestyle coaching, executive coaching, and I'm carrying on with that. And that kind of spurred on my interest. And I was friends with Severin Hupsher Davidson, who is a lecturer or a professor at the Open University, and she was looking into translator well-being. So we kind of started working on that together, and that's where it all happened.
That's amazing. I think we'll come across some of the findings and we'll discuss some of them throughout our discussion. But did you see any differences between interpreters and translators when it comes to your findings, and did you put separate criteria?
So I don't have any findings on that per se, because the research project that I carried out with Joseph Lambert and Callum Walker was looking specifically at freelance translators. So it means that some of those people do work as interpreters, but most of their workload is in translating. I know there's been a bit more research carried out for interpreters. I'd like to find out more about that. My gut instinct would be that interpreters, not all of them, but most of them tend to be more extroverts, whereas translators tend to be a little bit more introverted. So I would say that there are some kind of psychological factors that play out when people decide to go into translation or interpreting. I would imagine, and that's basically speculation here, but that would need to be tested out, that if you go into translation, you kind of like to have a second chance at things. So you might be more worried about having the perfect product. Not that interpreters don't care, but I'm sure they do care a lot. But when you're interpreter, you've got to accept that when you've said it is gone and you can't come back, you can't.
Yeah, I agree.
So,
like we noticed here also in Saudi Arabia, even across our members, interpreters versus translators. Interpreters tend to focus more on their social skills and soft skills, and how to represent themselves and represent the entity, and it's a lot of pressure. There's no denying on that. It's a lot of pressure on interpreters. As you mentioned, it's, hopefully it does not affect the product itself, but yeah, it's more social pressure, I guess, and mental maybe.
And what I find interesting in what you're saying, that I suspect that nowadays in the UK anyway, a lot of translators, find that they've got to do more of that in order to be successful in their business. And that's something that doesn't come naturally to some of them. Some actually struggle with that. And it'd be easy to dismiss it and say, well, that's the way the world is now, wake up, smell the coffee, get on with it. But if psychologically it's not something you're going to do naturally, there is a mental blockage that exists. And that's when maybe a form of CPD that allows translators to kind of discuss that, find out what kind of personality type they have, what they could put in place to kind of have more adaptive responses to some of the challenges, could be helpful in this day and age.
Absolutely. I think moving on to our associations or entities, I think part of the value of the ITI, at least in my opinion, my eyes, lies in their like long-standing history, like the well-established relationship with the job market, the language services market in the UK since the 1980s. So it's decades and decades of experience in language services. When it comes to ours, for example, ours rely maybe or is related much to the very vibrant Saudi economy, the large financial investments, the very young workforce we have here. But in general, like despite these differences, how do you view the value of translation associations in your region and ours, or in general, in advocating the interests of interpreters and translators, in creating this, upholding these standards, maybe professional standards, and so on?
I mean, obviously, as a board director of ITI, I'm going to say I think there is immense value in translator associations, professional associations like ITI or yours. I think the number one value, or the one that I can see straight away, that being a translator can be a bit isolating. And that's something that when we did, you know, our focus groups and our surveys, we found, you know, when we asked about their well-being, something that came up, or that people said, you know, I love my job, but sometimes it feels a bit lonely. So to be able to network with colleagues, to meet people who have the same specialist domains, same language combination, that's kind of often the starting point. It's very valuable. You kind of break away from this isolation because now translators work primarily online. I can't think of a translator who will not, you know, work from home on their computer. So to have this opportunity to meet other people who have potentially similar issues, who are wondering the same things, that's the number one. And ITI, I know we've got the regional networks where it encourages people to meet even socially sometimes. So recently in Newcastle, there's been the picnic in the park for translators. They can meet.
Oh,
It's initiatives like that where you can meet on a personal level as well, to know that you've got a community of people with shared interest. I think that's very, very important.
yeah, because people sometimes doubt these social gatherings, social events that we organize for translators. People sometimes say it's perhaps in their eyes it's a bit useless, but as you mentioned, there is a big part of our profession related to our well-being, our mental health, our social skills, our network we create amongst us translators, isn't it?
I think it's linked to some perception that people have of what is productive time. And for a lot of translators, if they're not translating, they feel like it's not productive when actually it could be many things where you're still doing your job, but it could be working on your online presence, you know, working on your branding. Obviously, you wouldn't want to do just that, but and sometimes it could be just having having a cup of tea with colleagues, you know, going to the park, doing social activities where you might be talking about everything and nothing, but you will keep the pulse on what's going on in the industry. You will, you know what's happening, and that's really, really important. I think when I was writing my book about working as a professional translator, I talk about, you know, being entrepreneurial. So what it means to be an entrepreneur for translators. And people have this idea that being an entrepreneur it's like having a new idea every day and having like the idea that it's going to make you a lot of money, when not at all. Being entrepreneurial is having, you know, finding solutions to your clients' problems, and they could be very small solutions. But also when you look at the most successful people, you realize that some of them spend 2, 3 hours in the morning just pottering, just doing nothing, taking the time to look after their plants, talk to their friends, you know, just
Attending
wind
to their
down.
hobbies.
Exactly, and attending to their well-being, therefore, and then they're very productive afterwards. It's something that a lot of translators find difficult to hear, and to be fair, I'm
Yeah,
an academic, and it's something that a lot of us academics struggle with as well,
yeah,
me included. I'm not always good at it, but it's something that we need to remind ourselves of.
of course. Of course, I totally agree. Let's move on to the question, the elephant in the room, the question that comes to mind, a lingering issue, to be honest, in the life of any translator today. With the rise of AI, translation technologies, all these new trends, this wave of change coming towards our profession, I believe personally that translators, and translation associations should reinvent themselves, reevaluate their work, to be honest, in order to leverage these technologies and navigate these technologies. But can you give us, from your research and expertise, some practical steps? First of all, what are these trends, do you think, that are coming, shaping or reshaping the translation industry for yours and ours globally? And how can we maneuver around them? How can we address them?
So, yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. The elephant in the room, everyone talks about it. And if you work with English, obviously, you know, large language models being trained primarily for English, they have amazing results. They're not perfect, but, you know, that's something that ITI has been thinking about a lot, and that's something that during our board meetings, we talk about that an awful lot. And again, this idea of reinventing ourselves. At the core of it is, what does it mean to be a translator in 2025, and what will it mean in 2030? The role of translators is changing. The way translators work is changing. The workflows are different. Some people really struggle with this idea because they feel that they're being turned, and I'm quoting from, again, a folks group, but it's being turned into mere post editors. They don't like that because they like the idea of producing the text. Others find that okay and they embrace it. In any case,
can I interrupt you here? Are they turning into post editors merely?
I don't think that. I think they perceive themselves as being turned into merely post editors, and it's true that sometimes they are given documents that have been translated by AI and they asked to kind of improve on it. I think that another way of looking at it, that translators are going to become, I mean, it's not the right word for it, but kind of selectors. So they'll be kind of presented with lots of different solutions, translation solutions that will be partly generated by machine translation, artificial intelligence, and they'll have to select the most appropriate one. And they also become prompters, prompting AI, making sure that the right parameters are there. These can be high-level cognitive jobs, and it can be really interesting. With my students, I always show to them how, if you want to prompt AI properly, you need to understand what translation is about. Somebody who does not understand translation cannot prompt a machine a generative AI properly, large language models, or not to a degree where you'd get the results that you want. If I'm going to pay a translator, I want added value. And that's not what generative AI produces at the moment. There's a lot of talk about diversification in the industry. I think a lot, again, some translators don't have a problem with that. Others, again, are very attached to their identity as translators. That's perfectly understandable.
Yeah.
For ITI, that's a challenge. How do we accompany people who want to think differently about their role, who think more widely about what it means to be a translator, while not betraying the ones who feel very strongly that translator is a specific job? It's about navigating the two. We're in a period of transition.
I agree.
So yeah, and there is no denying that AI is transforming how we define the word translator, and that's there'll still be translators, but it won't be the same as it is now. But then again, if you think about what it meant to be a translator 30, 40 years ago, the job is very different now. Anyway.
Can you draw like a picture of an ideal maybe translator in 2030? Let's talk to new generations of translators. I think they are not worried much about translation because they did not go through the traditional process of text to text and using just the keyboard and dictionaries and stuff. They are relying heavily on the AI and the technologies they have. But you just mentioned something very important, the diversity. Now the lines are very much blurring between content creation and translation and content strategy and intercultural research and re-narrating and rewriting. Can you draw an image of an ideal translator? I know this is very difficult, but let's
really is.
Ideals here.
If I had a crystal ball, that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
But
magic wand.
I mean, okay, I'm going to tell you my gut instinct, but I have no idea whether I'm right or wrong, right? I feel that we're going back to the idea of having a linguist, somebody who is like an intercultural language specialist that will have a really good understanding of the source and the target cultures, like really good. For a while, some translators had 2-3 languages. I think that probably is going to become a thing of the past. You'll have more of a one language combination that you understand really, really well, very thorough knowledge. You'll have extremely good command of your target language. That's going to be like primary task. It was already the case, but even more so. And you'll be checking the output that's come from artificial intelligence, checking for its suitability, whether it's what your client wants, and there will be a bit of copywriting involved in a way. Like, but I think that will be, yeah, I think the time where a translator could get away with being just slightly better than what machine translation could produce, that's going to disappear. You'll have to be much better to really show
We'll
added
come back
value.
to maybe give a brief of these practical steps, but can we go back to the trends? We spoke about technologies and the AI. What are other disruptive forces shaping our industry or reshaping our industry, do you think?
Good question. I think another trend has been mergers and acquisitions. In the last few years, there's been a lot of them. I mean, slowed down, but in the UK there was a lot of them, which means that a lot of smaller translation agencies have disappeared. You've got big corporations that, you know, have therefore a lot of power in their hands, and that creates an imbalance of power with freelance translators in terms of setting the terms and conditions. Again, linked to automation, but mainly not directly, but the rates that have not gone up very much. I think for the UK,
you mean the fees, the income?
Yeah. So in the UK, it's particularly acute because of of English being a global language where there is competition from all over the world. People can be based anywhere, but the cost of living in the UK might be higher. So that's been a bit of a challenge. I mean, a challenge that's always been around and that continues to be around is how, actually, maybe it's getting worse, is how little the general public understands translation. That, you know, there's a lot of people who still see translation as photocopying between languages. And again, I'm quoting, that's from a freelance translator who used that image. I think it's a very good one. And I think that machine translation has reinforced this idea of, you know, Google Translate on your phone, that people think, oh, well, you know, it's easy, right?
Yeah.
And they don't understand that it's really expert work, and that a lot of it is invisible.
I heard someone saying, why do we have departments for translation universities? No need to study translation anyways. It's a practical thing. It's something you do automatically between two languages. And I agree, people have a lot of, sometimes you see a lot of ignorance about translation in society.
And I think that professional associations and universities will have to work together on that. In the UK, it's a very, very worrying trend as well, because universities are going through a financial crisis and a lot of departments are being closed because they're seen as expensive and not necessary. But I think that we have partly shot ourselves in the foot. So it's been very complicated, but I think 20 years ago, a lot of departments in translations focused just on literary translation, and that was a problem. Because, you know, yeah, and the theory, and just, you know, and that meant that a lot of graduates were not equipped to go into the translation industry, and so that had to be addressed. And I was part of those people trying to address it, and my job title is translation industry studies, so I'm clearly based on that side of things. But I think that it's also been used and abused by some universities to showcase how that, you know, they have vocational programs that make students directly employable, and that's kind of the other extreme, where now people say, well, why would you have that program then if all your students do when they leave is going to translation and interpreting? And in fact, we don't need translators and interpreters, when actually we need to demonstrate that if you study translation and interpreting, you study way more than just how to translate and interpret, because it's a lot of cognitive, critical skills that can be applied to lots of contexts. You're an expert in intercultural communication, basically, that can be deployed in many ways. So the fact that in the industry, the role of translator it's not in danger, but it's being challenged and questioned by AI.
Yeah.
coupled with the fact that a lot of the general public therefore sees that as well, the role is dying, there is no need for that. And that therefore people, the decision makers in higher education for universities are thinking, well, why do we have a program that is churning out translators and interpreters if there won't be any jobs? I think we need to address the narrative and say, well, actually, no, it's more complex than that.
So can you just briefly summarize your message to higher education decision makers or the universities in general? What should we tell those who are responsible of closing translation departments or not believing in the importance and the value of teaching translation in universities?
Well, my number one message would be, do you really want to rely on artificial intelligence for all of your translation and interpreting needs? And if so, what will happen if, say, the system is down? I mean, I think that for all nations around the globe, there is also it's a matter of national security, strategic security to have translators and interpreters. It's not just, like you can't just rely on the machine, basically, because you need people to be able to assess the output. We know that language can be easily manipulated. I have a PhD student starting soon who wants to look into how news items that are translated by generative AI do not mean exactly the same thing. There is a manipulation that's kind of part of the system bias. That's not, it's not malevolent. It's not that the system decides to be mean, but basically we know there is a bias in all machine translation tools, and that therefore you need a human being to kind of look at the result and say, okay, that's fine, but this bit is not fine, because sometimes even it's just expressio, that's what it's called, it's the way things are expressed slightly differently to different culture, and that could transform the message, and the tool, the machine translation tool, is not aware of it. So I think there are very big implications, and you still need people. You don't need as many people trained in translation and interpreting, but you need even higher quality people trained in translation and interpreting.
Exactly. It's not about the quantity anymore.
No, it's about quality.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, we need to have some multifaceted, very specialized translators who are assessors and critical thinkers and analysts. We need to find, I believe we have to have less programs for general translation or specialized translation, as in law translation, medical translation, and sports translations. It's all about the set of skills and tools, cognitive skills we should give this human being to become this interpreter and translator we can count on.
I mean, I agree 100%. Really, that's exactly how I see things. And I think that that's the challenge for professional associations, is that we know that some professions are regulated because they've been recognized by society as being vital. So you'll find nurses are regulated, like GPs, or there's a set of professions like that are regulated and protected, therefore, where, you protect programs, you make sure that it's not because there is no funding that those programs won't run, because you need them. So it doesn't seem that obvious to say that translators, interpreters are vital for the health of a society. I personally believe they are, and they need to be protected. Again, you don't need that many of them anymore, but you need a certain number that will be highly qualified and therefore be in highly respected professions with the salaries that go with it, the recognition that goes with it. Because if they were to disappear altogether, their expertise would be so, it'd be a vital problem for society. That there would be massive consequences. Think about medical translation and interpreting, for instance. So there needs to be a way to convince politicians that
I agree.
it needs to be protected and regulated.
Even financially, I would agree with this, because having also this amount of perhaps very young workforce here in Saudi Arabia, might encourage some translators to lower their fees and compromise. And and I believe this is very detriment to the profession and does not give enough value to those who are very, very dedicated, specialized, and qualified. And we have a problem with outsourcing as well, just like yours in the UK. So,
and I think again, it's about specializations, kind of trying to convey the message. I know we're all trying very hard, but it's a very hard message to drive home that when you pay for a translator, interpreter, you don't pay them just for translating one word into another one. You pay them for all the years they've trained, for all their expertise, experience, the years that they've kind of paid out of their own pocket sometimes to kind of train as translator interpreters.
This is beautifully said. Can you just repeat this? Because we need this information to go everywhere. We need people to pay for the skills and the years of training that went into this text, and not the text itself, letter by letter or page by page.
I mean, that's what people recognize when they talk about, say, highly skilled technicians or a surgeon. You know that you're not paying just for that operation, but for all the training that they've that people recognize that, but they've got a complete blind spot for translation and interpreting, because they think that anyone who speaks two languages can do it. And because people will have done it, like you, they'll have known somebody who's the family meeting and somebody will interpret between the one and the other, and that's fine. But the stakes are not the same. And it's not, we know that to be a properly qualified translator or interpreter, you need to go way beyond that.
I agree. I totally agree. But if you have like new translators and interpreters who want exposure, representation, opportunities, you might maybe tolerate a year or two of providing services for free, or being part of initiatives and schemes that are unpaid or underpaid. But I think the translator should move quickly ahead out of the stage and into a profession that is more specialized and qualified. Do you agree?
Yeah. And I think that, I just agree, and I think that it's a complex situation for people starting as freelance translators at the moment, where, again, I wonder how much of that is linked to some psychological factors. And when I say that, I'm not saying that judging at all. I just wonder whether some people naturally are not a bit better at asserting their worth and say, this is what I'll do it for, and this is my rate, and they're willing to lose some clients over that, but willing to keep the good ones. Now it's easier to do when you work with direct clients than with agencies. I'm aware of that, but some people seem to be able to do that. Others, they're just a bit more shy, a bit more self-conscious. They think, well, I've just started. What would I know? This is the rate, and then they find that it's not sustainable. I think that we should kind of discuss that more in translator training as well, and preempt those situations to kind of warn them of bad industry practices, what's happening there, and how sometimes they'll have to stand their ground. Although it's very difficult to tell people what to do when you don't know how they pay the bills. But and I think that if people leave the translation industry because they find that it's not paying them well enough, or it's not using them well, I find it sad. I think it's problematic for all the reasons we've given, but I don't blame them. At the end of the day, they'll have to do.
But maybe we should not discourage them as well. From this perspective, I'd like them to stay motivated and never lose hope. A year or two is not enough to figure out what you like and not like in a huge profession like translation. You keep trying and you keep failing, and that's okay. Some people are late bloomers, actually. Some of them found out that they have a talent in something very late in their profession, and that's okay.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we need to kind of move away. And I'm talking there from the perspective of a university lecturer, of an academic, so translator trainers sometimes kind of give this impression that if you want to be successful as a translator, you need to be a full-time translator and do just that, when actually some of the most successful people I know are translators, but they also do some language teaching, they do some copy editing, they do different things. And to move away from the either or and maybe use and a bit more. So if you're struggling at the beginning as a translator because it takes you time to get your client base because it's a difficult market to get into, what else can you do? Do that
Yeah,
and something else. Maybe you can get a part-time job that will not be your day job. It may not be what you love, but that will give you the financial backing to kind of set yourself up. So
exactly.
to say and.
And you know what? Maybe that's another way, another window on whatever they love. Maybe mixing their job with whatever they're doing in translation might be the solution, might be the answer to
Yeah.
whatever they're looking for. As you mentioned before, you have to be multifaceted. You have to know different things and try to explore and
Yeah.
experiment,
Yeah.
basically. Isn't translation, after all, an art? There is no right and wrong. You have to go and explore and find your way through this.
Yeah, no, I agree. And then you could even end up having a part-time job in an industry that's completely different, and that will be your way into the translation industry because you end up translating text around that. So you
Yeah,
never know. But yeah, I do talk about that in my book, about how there is something called planned happenstance, like you've got to kind of create opportunities by networking and look at everything that you can do, like seize every opportunity. But at the end of the day, you can't really plan how you're going to get into
exactly.
where you are, 20 years later, because that life happens whilst you're making other plans, and that's happened to me, and that's the same. So there is sometimes undue pressure on the new generation of translators to go into translating and do just that, which may have been the case 30 years ago when you get an in-house job, but those are practically gone altogether in the UK. So you've got to think about it differently, and I think more.
I see a
Yeah.
lot of translation students who we had in the university, and they found out that they are excellent copywriters or strategic
Yeah.
planners for content, and for others went even to politics through the doors of interpreting. And doors are always open for those who knock on them and try. This is the thing we need to assert here for all
Yeah.
our new translators and our
And
members. Yeah.
And to bring it back to professional associations, I think that that's something that I know ITI, we're thinking a lot about that. And how can we keep the door open to those people into the professional association? Because if you're going to have people who end up being politicians and they're still members of the ITI because they still feel that's one aspect of their professional identity, that's very useful to us because they're going to be helping us lobby government to protect the profession, to understand it better. So how do we kind of not shut the door? It's like, if you're not a translator, that's it. If you're not an interpreter, that's it. That's all we want, and be more open about who we have. Obviously, you don't want everyone. It's not like, but you know what I mean? Like, but how do we kind of maintain bridges for people who do this and I'm a translator and something else, and then it means that we're more effective at driving home our message to the general public because they are there.
I agree. Like in 2025, I think it's impossible to be without an and.
Yeah.
You should have and 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 and
Yeah.
and be strong at 2 or 3 or maybe 1. That's okay.
Yeah.
And experiment with the others.
Yeah. And I mean, this applies to myself. I'm an academic and a coach.
Yeah.
So I work full time for the university, and I've got my business as a coach
Yeah.
And would I do just coaching if I could? Yeah, part of me thinks yes, but I quite like the having 2 jobs and 2 different professional identities. And I think that's something that's kind of true of a lot of people these days, that we like the
Yeah.
diversity of roles. And certainly for translators, I mean, not all of them, but we need to help them get there to see that it can be something really interesting in your life, can spice it up a bit.
Yeah. I'll take you back to the findings, because these are very important. The findings of your research on well-being. How can we you mentioned that our profession can be very isolating, very demanding. It could be lonely sometimes and disappointing sometimes. How can translators practically stay motivated, resilient, and keep their well-being intact? And can we help as entities and associations? Can we help them out? Can we merge into their safety network and be part of their validation and support?
So yeah, that's a good question. Thanks for asking that. We with Joseph Lambert and Callum Walker, so the two colleagues I've mentioned before, we've just written an article that hopefully will be published open access for the Journal of Specialized Translation. So it's in review, and that's about well-being for translators. And the first thing that we set out to do, and I thought, I was reviewing everything that's been written on that, and I realized that actually there'd never been a definition of translator well-being. So we talk about it, but we give characteristics of well-being, but we don't define it. So I went to read articles around that from for actually medical practitioners, and there was a good definition in that I've adapted for translator well-being. And so if you think about translator well-being, think about it like a seesaw. In the playgrounds, and you've got a ball in the middle, and that's the well-being. And on either side, you've got, so on one side, you've got the physical, social, and psychological challenges that you may encounter as a translator. And on the other side, you've got your own physical, social, and psychological resources. And if one of them is off balance, then your well-being is off kilter and starts rolling away. So if you're, say, under challenge as a translator, because you feel like you're doing just post-editing, it's about your perception of the work. It's not about reality, because it's all about how you perceive that well-being.
This is very important.
But if say you're feeling under challenge, then you start feeling bored, understimulated, and then you won't feel well in yourself. If, on the other hand, you feel overstretched, so you feel like either the physical, the social, or the psychological challenges are too much, then your well-being will not keep up. So when we used that definition, and then we looked at the results from the data from our 1-year project, and we realized that physical was not really an issue for most translators. I mean, you've got the usual problems of sometimes maybe being sat a bit too long, but people go for a walk. That's not really the issue. That's not really. Social was not too much of an issue. I think that people felt, obviously, the people we interviewed were all part of a professional association, so self-selected, but most of them felt that they had the social support they needed. I think that where it became a bit more problematic was more the psychological resources, and especially with AI. So there was a lot of fear, angst, feeling overwhelmed by so especially for people being in the job for a bit longer, 20, 30 years, and they feel like you've got those new, what they call again, it's a bit like the Uberization you've got on your phone, like platforms like where you've got to kind of outbid people for translations if you've got to be there 24/7. And that encroaches upon one of the things that a lot of translators value the most about their work, which is the quality of the time they've got. They're in control of their own schedules. So if you've got a family, it means that you can go and pick up the kids from school and then do your jobs. It's quite flexible, but that's starting to change with automation, because you've got to kind of constantly outbid other people to be the first to have the job, and then it can be a feast or famine cycle where sometimes you've got too much work, you can't do it, other times you've got none. So to go back to your question, how can we could support that? Well, I think that, so that's a project I'm working on at the moment. We need to work on mental toughness for translators. Mental toughness is a construct from positive psychology. And it doesn't mean that, the opposite of mental toughness is not being mentally weak, it's just being mentally sensitive. But mental toughness has 4 C's. It's about confidence in your own abilities, It's about I'm going to forget them now. I've got them somewhere close, but there's 4 C's around the control, how much control you feel you've got over your working life, for instance, for translators. And there's another 2 that have escaped me.
But, I just saw a question popping here about the well-being. Perhaps you might merge this in your answer. He's asking about the nature of the company or the place he's working in, or the text he's working on. Do they have a significant impact on the translator's well-being, and how do they have control? This is, I think, one of the C's. How do you have control over something basically you cannot have control over?
Well, that's the thing. So I work more with freelance translators because 80% of translators in the UK are freelance now. So we've got very, very few in-house translators. When I've worked with in-house translators for big organizations, and often the issues are kind of linked but a bit different. But you're right. So when there are things you don't have any control over. So the positive psychology, the answer will be what you can control is how you react to them. I would say up to a point. So it could be weaponized, and then it could make you feel guilty about not responding well to events. So if you're being bullied at work, it's not just how you respond to it, right? That wouldn't be appropriate. So for me, sustainable well-being has 2 sides. First of all, is you just looking after your own well-being, so how you respond to things. And also then there is a social engagement. So it could be through being a member of a trade union, for instance, or being a member of a professional association to try and shape things in a way where you can improve working conditions and therefore, in a more systemic way. So that's sustainable well-being, but to be able to kind of to start change or to try and improve things, you need to look after yourself first. If you're not going well, you won't be in a position to help others and help, for instance, if you work in-house, confront people, help improve processes or working conditions for everybody else.
Did you mention this in your book?
Yes.
Or is it the further research? Okay, so people may go and
I
read
mentioned
about
that in my book, but I'm still working on that to kind of understand that a bit better as well. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. I think also part of this is the awareness amongst translators. I always say and repeat this to our members, associations and entities and all these institutions are not enough to provide you with opportunities or support you fully or give you full protection or support. Or at the end of the day, we work together, us and you, individuals, in exploring together, facing challenges together, growing together, seeing the future together. We can provide schemes of training, programs, and all these projects and leadership, even in some projects, but we cannot give them the know-how fully, can we? It's always on you. You mentioned something about the well-being. You have to control it yourself. Control the environment, the work you take, your time, what you can take and cannot take, I guess, is very important. And this is resilience in a nutshell, isn't it?
No, yeah, absolutely. And I like what you say about growing together. And again, so professional associations traditionally, translator, interpreter, professional associations, and they still do that to a point. But it's a lot of the CPD offering was around the hard skills, like how to be a more effective copy editor, how to use this translation tool. And that's important and everything. And a lot of translators want that still. I am convinced that that's not what they need the most at the moment. They need more CPD around becoming more reflective practitioners, getting to know themselves a bit better so that they can, even how they learn, because some people like still learn in a way that's not right for them.
Yeah.
And learning to learn better, learning to understand yourself a bit better, to how you can evolve, what suits you, reconnect with your calling as a translator, as an interpreter, what it means for you. There should be more space for that. in what is a very, very, we know that in this day and age, people have very little time to think sometimes. So professional associations should create those safe spaces where, with colleagues, people can think about those issues together and reflect on where they're going to feel a bit more human at the end.
Yeah, and this is actually a very powerful sport if you think about it. I believe much more than workshops and courses. Let me ask you this question I had here. How can our associations, yours and ours, or associations in different countries, encourage knowledge sharing, cultural exchange, and best practice global dialogue to ensure that translators worldwide are well prepared to meet the demands of this interconnected world? I think what he's saying here is, how can we cooperate more and work effectively together across borders? Isn't this the ultimate mission of us translators? How can we open dialogue between us and other institutions across border and becoming more effective, like in supporting translators and strengthening their voice in the world?
I think that what we're doing today is exactly what we should be doing more of, talking to each other, listening to each other, seeing, how much common ground we've got. Actually, we'll have things that we'll see slightly differently, and that's actually really helpful, and because it gives us a different perspective. But fundamentally, I think that the issues are the same everywhere. We're facing the same challenges, so trying to confront them together would be much more powerful. I'm always disappointed to see that FIT, for instance, is just an umbrella association where there's lots of different associations that belong to it, but it doesn't really, I mean, they do some work jointly, but globally, it's not a big organization where we'd all work together. Maybe that's what we need in the future, like for translator. I mean, it would be a mess. It would be a proper mess, but something where there's more opportunities to really get together and like on a global scale, and I know that in academia, so for university that exists, you've got international associations. I'm not aware of something like that really.
I think we're proud to be part of an international event happening every single year here in Saudi Arabia, which is the translation. It's like a conference, an event that happens every year, and it's international. And we tend to host companies and associations and universities from all over. And it's very, very beneficial. And we had some very huge engagements and openings coming as a result of this event. I wonder if in the UK or in Europe, there's a similar international event for translators, but this would be an idea to put out there maybe for the future.
I think it's a great idea. I'm not aware of anything like that existing. I will ask Sarah because she'd know, but I'm not aware of it. One thing that I can think of straight away is the question of funding. At the moment, with funding being so difficult to get by, but otherwise, yeah. I mean, I've heard of your conference every year because I know colleagues who've been, and they spoke very highly of it. And obviously, that would be something that would be amazing.
At least we started the conversation.
Yes.
I think we opened the door, me and you, our associations, and hopefully more cooperations and more discussions globally will take place for the best interest of translators.
Yeah, I'm hoping that this is just the beginning, and I'm sure that Sarah would be keen to kind of continue the dialogue between the two professional associations to make sure that we collaborate as closely as we can on issues that are, joint issues and where all of our members can benefit. That's definitely something that we'd be keen to do. Yeah.
It was delightful talking to you, Dr. Bennett, and I hope our discussion today was insightful, inspiring for translators in your community and in ours in both countries. And we'll continue to have an open discussion with you, and we're glad to have this exchange with you. I think there are no questions in the Q&A section other than asking about your LinkedIn.
All right.
and asking about this session, if it's recorded or not, and I think it is.
So
do you have any final comments?
no, I just hope that I didn't waffle too much and that I've answered your questions.
No,
I
it
was
was
really, really pleased to be here today. I've really enjoyed the conversation with you. To be honest, what I did that I blocked everybody else. I was just like I just had you. It felt like having a conversation with a colleague,
Thank
which
you.
was really lovely. But I do hope that it's been useful for the audience, and I'm leaving with food for thought. I think there was a question about my LinkedIn. I could copy that in the chat if you wanted.
Yes, please.
That mine, hang on, not sure that's I'm gonna give you that in a minute. But yeah, I do hope that everyone who attended feels that it's been helpful. And I will report back to Sarah and talk to her and see how, we can continue the conversation. Because I'm sure there's still lots to talk about. I should have asked more questions about your side of the story. I would like to hear more about how it is for you
I
in
think
Saudi Arabia, but yeah.
We'll have many other sessions, hopefully, in the future. I think we have one more question, if you don't mind. Here, he said, Mr. Abdurrahman here says, you mentioned the need to raise awareness about the importance of translation and the role of translators among various entities that seem to be embracing artificial intelligence without accounting for it, for its risks. But what role do our association play in raising this awareness, and how can we achieve that? That's a big question for our conclusion. If you can give us a brief answer for this.
I think that professional associations have to be a voice of reason. I mean, we can't be, obviously, there are people, we know the kind of neoliberal discourse that can be very pro technologies without thinking about the risk, and that we need to kind of warn against that, whilst at the same time striking a balance, acknowledging that there are good uses of artificial intelligence, even for translation and interpreting. There are instances where it could help to promote social justice, where otherwise translation and interpreting wouldn't be available, and that's making that available. But that there are instances where it does the opposite, where it can go against greater social justice because of the biases, for instance, or the issues that come up. So I think it's about professional associations need to listen to their members, to listen outside to the needs of society, the other stakeholders, translation and interpretation users, and then to kind of find common ground and say, okay, where do we need to raise awareness? What do we need to do? So I don't have the answer, to be honest. I'm just.
And then between you're talking about entities and translators.
Yeah.
To create this common ground between the two.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
agree. Like even IT companies, business, as you mentioned, and huge businesses in the language industry to come and discuss this with interpreters and translators.
Yeah.
Through these associations. Thank you so much. We took a lot of your time, Dr. Bennett, but it was such a joy.
It's been an absolute pleasure, really.
To us as well. Thank you so much, and you have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for all our attendees, and hopefully we'll have many of such discussions in the coming time, inshallah. Yeah. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
And you. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone.